I noticed him before he noticed me. That's the nature of being invisible. The servant corridors of Ravenwood Palace were my sanctuary, a web of narrow passages where I could navigate undetected between the grand chambers. The stone walls held centuries of whispered secrets, absorbing the soft padding of my footsteps as I carried freshly pressed linens up the spiral staircase. My hands, raw from lye soap and hot water, gripped the basket tighter as I heard the commotion ahead. Female voices, honey-sweet but laced with venom, competing for attention. The royal selection had begun. For 3 months, princesses from across the 7 kingdoms would reside in the palace, each vying to become the Alpha King's mate. The air was thick with expensive perfumes, so potent they made my eyes water even from the servants' passage. I paused at a small gap in the stone wall, a forgotten architectural flaw that offered a perfect viewing point into the grand hall. "They say he's refused every match for 5 years," whispered Marta, another maid who appeared beside me, her gray eyes wide with gossip. "The council is desperate. He must choose a mate before the winter solstice or forfeit the crown." I nodded absently, my attention caught by the procession below. The princesses glided across polished marble, their gowns shimmering like exotic birds. Sapphire blue from the Western Isles, emerald green from the Forest Kingdom, ruby red from the mountain territories, each woman more beautiful than the last, trained from birth for this moment. And then there was me, Ilara, just Ilara, no family name worth mentioning. My pale blonde hair tucked beneath a simple cap, hands calloused from scrubbing floors, invisible except when something needed cleaning or fetching. The daughter of a palace cook who died from fever, leaving me alone at 12 with nothing but her silver thimble, a family heirloom she'd pressed into my palm on her deathbed. "Remember, little light," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over her rattling breath. "True power comes not from crowns or commands, but from here." She'd touched my heart. Kindness endures when strength fails. I carried that thimble always, tucked into a small pocket sewn into my dress. My talisman. My reminder. "There he is," Marta gasped, pressing closer to our viewing spot, the Alpha King. Even from a distance, King Dominic Blackthorn commanded attention. He moved with the fluid grace of the wolf that lived within him, his broad shoulders draped in a midnight cloak fastened with a silver clasp. His face remained expressionless as he surveyed the princesses, acknowledging each curtsy with the barest nod. Dark hair fell across his forehead, partially concealing eyes that were said to shift from gray to silver when his wolf emerged. "They say his wolf has never accepted any woman as worthy," Marta continued. "That's why he's still unmated at 30. The beast is too particular." Something in his posture caught my attention. Attention, like a bowstring pulled too tight. While the court saw only power and authority, I recognized the subtle signs of someone performing a role. Someone trapped. I understood feeling trapped. "Come." Marta tugged at my sleeve. "The head housekeeper will have our hides if these linens aren't delivered." I reluctantly pulled away, continuing my ascent to the royal guest chambers. Each princess had been assigned a suite according to her rank and kingdom, and it fell to the servants to ensure every detail was perfect. The slightest oversight could result in a complaint, and complaints resulted in punishments. The East Wing housed Princess Isolde of the Coastal Kingdoms, rumored to be the frontrunner for the Alpha King's hand. Her chambers smelled of sea salt and jasmine as I quietly entered to deliver fresh bedding. I expected the room to be empty. The princesses were all at the welcoming ceremony. But a soft sob from the balcony stopped me short. Princess Isolde stood with her back to me, shoulders shaking slightly. Her lady's maid hovered nearby, offering a handkerchief. "He didn't even look at me, Greta," she whispered. 5 years I've prepared for this moment. 5 years of lessons on how to please an alpha mate. "Your Highness, it was only the first meeting," her maid soothed. "There are 3 months of courtship ahead." "You don't understand." I saw his eyes, cold, disinterested. Princess Isolde turned, and I froze, hoping she wouldn't notice me. "If I don't secure this match, my father will give me to Lord Karsten." "He's 60 years old, Greta. 60. I should have slipped away, should have made myself invisible as I'd learned to do over years of service. Instead, I stood transfixed, the linens clutched to my chest, struck by the genuine fear in the princess's voice. She spotted me then, her expression shifting from vulnerability to haughty disdain in an instant. "What are you staring at, girl? Put those down and get out!" I cursed quickly, keeping my eyes lowered. "Forgive me, Your Highness. I meant no offense." "Wait," she said as I turned to leave. "Come here." My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached, stopping at a respectful distance. Princess Isolde circled me, her eyes calculating. "You're rather pretty for a servant," she mused, reaching out to pull my cap away. My pale blonde hair tumbled past my shoulders, and I suppressed a flinch. "What's your name?" "Ilara, Your Highness. Ilara," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Tell me, Ilara, what do you know of the Alpha King? The servants must gossip." I hesitated. I know only what everyone knows, Your Highness. That he is fair but stern. That he has ruled alone since his father's passing." "Don't play coy," she snapped. "You work in these halls. You see things. What pleases him? What angers him? I need every advantage." The desperation beneath her commanding tone made my throat tighten with unexpected sympathy. "He walks the eastern gardens before dawn," I offered quietly. "Alone. He seems to find peace there." Something softened in her expression. "Thank you. That's useful." She waved her hand dismissively. "You may go now." I replaced my cap, curtsied again, and retreated with my dignity intact, if a bit shaken. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Princess Isolde already planning with her maid how to accidentally encounter the king during his morning walks. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks, turning down beds, lighting fires, carrying messages. The palace hummed with excitement over the selection, servants and nobles alike placing wagers on which princess would capture the king's interest. I kept to the shadows, efficient and unnoticed, exactly as I'd been taught. Night fell, and with it came a rare moment of peace. My small room in the servants' quarters, really little more than a closet with a narrow bed, offered solitude after the day's chaos. I removed my cap and shook out my hair, wincing as I massaged my aching feet. Through my tiny window, moonlight spilled across the garden paths below, illuminating a solitary figure. The Alpha King walked alone, his pace restless, like a caged animal seeking escape. Without the formal attire and the watching crowd, he seemed different, younger perhaps, more human than legend. He stopped beneath an ancient oak tree, his head tilted back to gaze at the stars, and something about his isolation resonated within me. We were both alone, though for very different reasons. A sharp knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. "Ilara." Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper, barked through the wood. "The king's study needs attending. The fire's gone out, and he's requested fresh candles." I scrambled to my feet. "At this hour?" "His Majesty often works late. Don't question, girl, just go." Hastily retying my apron and cap, I gathered supplies and hurried through the quiet corridors. The king's private study was located in the West Tower, separated from the main palace by a covered bridge. A sanctuary few servants were permitted to enter. My heart fluttered nervously in my chest. I had never served the king directly before. The study door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. I knocked softly. "Enter," came a deep voice from within. I pushed the door open with my hip, arms full of candles and kindling. The room was smaller than I'd imagined, but no less impressive. Bookshelves climbed to the ceiling, interspersed with maps and curious artifacts. A massive desk dominated the space, piled with documents bearing royal seals. The fire had indeed died to embers in the large stone hearth. I kept my eyes lowered as I moved to tend it, setting down my supplies and kneeling before the grate. "You're not the usual attendant," the king observed. His voice held a rough quality, like stones tumbling down a mountainside. "No, Your Majesty," I replied, focusing on arranging kindling over the coals. "Thomas is unwell. I'm his replacement for tonight." A moment of silence followed, during which I could feel his gaze on me. I struck flint to steel, coaxing the embers back to life with careful breath until flames licked at the kindling. "You do that well," he remarked. "Most servants waste half my kindling before getting a proper fire going." I risked a glance in his direction, finding him leaning against his desk, arms crossed. Up close, the Alpha King was even more imposing, tall and powerfully built, with a face that might have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that caught me, gray in the firelight, watchful and somehow ancient in a face that couldn't have seen more than 30 winters. "My mother taught me," I said before I could think better of it. "She said patience matters more than force when coaxing fire from embers." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that a servant would speak so directly. I immediately dropped my gaze, focusing on placing fresh candles in the holders around the room. "Your mother sounds wise," he said finally. "She was, Your Majesty." "Was?" I swallowed hard. "She passed 5 years ago. Fever." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss." The simple humanity of his condolence caught me off guard. I looked up again, and our eyes met fully for the first time. Something peculiar happened then, a jolt, like static in the air before a lightning strike. His nostrils flared slightly, and his eyes widened a fraction. Then the moment passed, and he turned away abruptly. "That will be all." I curtsied deeply, backing toward the door, confused by the sudden dismissal. As I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me. "Your name, girl." "Alara, Your Majesty." He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Good night, Alara." "Good night, Your Majesty," I whispered, and slipped away into the darkened corridor, my heart racing inexplicably. Only when I was halfway back to my quarters did I realize I was clutching my mother's thimble through the fabric of my dress, seeking comfort from its familiar shape. Something had changed in that brief exchange. A shift as subtle yet profound as the turning of seasons. I couldn't name it, couldn't understand it, but as I lay in my narrow bed that night, the Alpha King's gray eyes followed me into my dreams, awakening something that had long slumbered within me, something dangerous. Dawn arrived with a flurry of activity throughout the palace. The first official day of the royal selection meant elaborate breakfasts, garden tours, and the initial private audiences between King Dominic and each princess. The servants' quarters emptied early, everyone assigned extra duties to accommodate the royal guests. "Alara," Mrs. Winters's voice cut through the morning chaos. "You've been reassigned." I looked up from the pile of linens I'd been sorting. "Reassigned?" "The king's personal chambers. You're to replace Thomas permanently." Her thin lips pressed together in disapproval. "Though why His Majesty would request someone as inexperienced as you is beyond my understanding." My pulse quickened. The king requested me specifically? "Don't look so pleased with yourself," she snapped. "Royal service means twice the work and thrice the scrutiny. One mistake, and you'll be back scrubbing chamber pots before sunset." She thrust a ring of ornate keys into my hand. "These open the king's private rooms. Guard them with your life." The weight of the keys felt significant in my palm, both privilege and burden. I clutched them tightly, nodding my understanding. "Report to Master Gerard in the West Wing. He'll explain your duties." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "And mind yourself, girl. Pretty servants in royal chambers often find themselves in compromising situations." Heat rushed to my face. "I would never—" "They all say that," she cut me off with a knowing look. "Just remember your place." Master Gerard, the king's steward, was a precise man with salt and pepper hair and impeccable posture. He outlined my responsibilities with military efficiency, tending the fires, changing linens, arranging fresh flowers, polishing silver, and ensuring the royal apartments remained spotless. Most importantly, I was to remain unseen unless specifically summoned. "His Majesty values his privacy above all else," Master Gerard emphasized. "Especially now, during this matrimonial circus." His distaste for the selection was barely concealed. "You'll enter through the servant's door, complete your tasks, and leave without disturbing him. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," I replied, already overwhelmed by the list of duties. "One last thing," he added, studying me with narrowed eyes. "The king specifically mentioned you were to serve only his private chambers, not the official receiving rooms where he'll entertain the princesses. Those areas have different staff." I blinked, uncertain why that distinction mattered, but nodded nonetheless. The king's private chambers were grander than I'd imagined, yet somehow simpler than expected. The sitting room held comfortable furniture rather than ostentatious pieces, bookshelves lined the walls, and large windows overlooked the forest beyond the palace grounds. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, carved with the royal crest, a wolf howling beneath a crown. I moved through the rooms quietly, dusting, straightening, learning the space. The bedchamber beyond contained an enormous four-poster bed draped in dark blue, simple luxury rather than gaudy opulence. Everything spoke of comfort and practicality, at odds with the intimidating public persona the king presented to his court. On his nightstand sat a small wooden carving of a wolf. I couldn't resist touching it gently, admiring the craftsmanship. The wood felt warm under my fingertips, worn smooth from frequent handling. That belonged to my father. I spun around, nearly knocking over a water pitcher. King Dominic stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I hadn't heard him enter. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," I stammered, dropping into a deep curtsy. I shouldn't have... "It's all right," he said, crossing the room to stand beside me. He lifted the carving, turning it in his hands. My father carved one for each of his children. Said it would help us remember our true nature, even when court life threatened to domesticate us. I remained silent, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected confidence. He returned the wolf to its place, then regarded me steadily. "Did Mrs. Winters explain your new duties?" "Yes, Your Majesty. And Master Gerard." "Good." He moved to the window, gazing out at the forest. "I've requested you specifically because you seem discreet." Was that the word he was searching for? His hesitation suggested otherwise. "I'll serve to the best of my ability, Your Majesty. I've no doubt." He turned back to me. "The coming weeks will be trying. 20 princesses, each with their own demands and expectations. This chamber must remain my sanctuary." I understood then. He needed one place untouched by the politics and machinations of the selection. One corner of the palace where he could simply be himself. "No one will disturb your peace here, Your Majesty. I'll make certain of it." Something like gratitude flickered in his eyes before he nodded briskly. "I have audiences all day. You may complete your duties now." After he departed, I moved through the chambers with new purpose. Determined to create the sanctuary he sought, I polished until surfaces gleamed, arranged fresh pine branches in the fireplace for their calming scent, and placed a bowl of apples on his desk. I'd noticed he favored them over the elaborate pastries served at court. The day passed quickly, and before I knew it, evening approached. The palace buzzed with gossip about the princess's private audiences with the king. I listened absently as I collected fresh towels from the laundry. Princess Isolde arrived at the garden walk before dawn, wearing a gown the color of sunrise. One laundress whispered, "But they say the king barely spoke 3 words to her." Princess Callista from the mountain territories wore a dress so low-cut, the court ladies were scandalized. Another added with a giggle, "The king ordered her to change before her audience." "What of Princess Valentina? I heard she's the most beautiful of all." "Beauty means little to an alpha seeking his true mate," said an older servant, folding sheets with practiced efficiency. "The wolf will know its match by scent, not appearance." I'd heard such tales before, how werewolf royalty could identify their destined mates through some primal instinct. It seemed like the stuff of fairy tales to me. Romantic nonsense to disguise what were essentially political marriages. Still, as I returned to the king's chambers to turn down his bed for the evening, I wondered, what would it be like to be so certain of belonging to someone, to be chosen not for political advantage or wealth, but because something ancient and instinctual recognized you as perfect for another? Such thoughts were dangerous for someone like me. I shook them away, focusing instead on my tasks. The door to the sitting room opened just as I finished plumping the pillows. I expected the king, but found myself facing Princess Isolde instead. She wore an elegant ivory gown, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls. Her eyes widened when she spotted me. "You! The maid from yesterday." She glanced around the room. "What are you doing in the king's private chambers?" I curtsied quickly. "I've been assigned to attend His Majesty's rooms, Your Highness." Something calculating crossed her features. "How fortunate for you." She moved further into the room, trailing her fingers along the furniture. "I was just looking for the king. We had such a lovely walk this morning, and he mentioned showing me a particular book of poetry. The lie was evident in her tone. I remembered Master Gerard's words about the king's privacy and stood a little straighter. His Majesty is attending the council meeting, Your Highness, and I'm afraid guests aren't permitted in the royal apartments without an escort. Her smile hardened. Are you presuming to give me orders, servant? Not at all, Your Highness. I'm simply following the palace protocols. Do you know who I am? She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the small space. I will be your queen within 3 months. It would be wise not to make an enemy of me so early. I lowered my gaze, but held my ground. Even the future queen must respect the king's privacy, Your Highness. Her hand moved so quickly I had no time to react. The slap stung my cheek, snapping my head to the side. How dare you? She hissed. I could have you dismissed for such insolence. You could, came a deep voice from the doorway, but then you would have to explain to me why you were in my private chambers without permission. We both turned to see King Dominic, his expression thunderous. Princess Isolde immediately transformed, her face softening into practiced contrition. Your Majesty, I was simply looking for you. We spoke of Calloway's sonnets this morning, and I thought— You thought to disregard explicit palace rules, he interrupted, his tone deceptively calm. The royal apartments are private, Princess Isolde. A fact your escorts should have made clear. I must have misunderstood, she said, lowering her eyes. Please forgive my enthusiasm to continue our discussion. The king's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Return to the East Wing, Princess. We will speak again at tomorrow's banquet. She curtsied deeply, all grace and submission, but as she passed me toward the door, her eyes promised retribution. Once she departed, the king closed the door firmly and turned to me. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. I touched my cheek, still warm from the slap. No, Your Majesty, it's nothing. He crossed the room and, to my shock, lifted my chin with his fingers, examining the reddening mark. It's not nothing. She struck you. His touch sent an odd tremor through me. This close, I could smell him. Pine needles and smoke and something wild beneath it all. My heart raced traitorously. I spoke out of turn, I murmured. You protected my privacy, as instructed. His thumb brushed my cheekbone once, so lightly I might have imagined it, before he stepped back. I'll speak to Princess Isolde about respecting palace staff. Please don't, I said quickly. It would only make things worse for me. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. As you wish. But if anyone, princess or otherwise, mistreats you again, you will tell me immediately. Is that understood? Yes, Your Majesty. I hesitated, then added, thank you. A hint of a smile touched his lips. You needn't look so surprised, Alara. Contrary to castle gossip, I'm not completely heartless. The way he said my name made something warm unfurl in my chest. Dangerous indeed. Over the next 2 weeks, I settled into my new routine. Each morning, I arrived before dawn to light the fires and prepare the king's chambers for the day. Most mornings, he had already departed for his solitary walk, but occasionally I would find him at his desk, reading correspondence or staring out at the forest with a troubled expression. We developed a quiet understanding. I moved efficiently around him, anticipating his needs without being told. A fresh pitcher of water when he'd been training with his guards, extra candles when council meetings ran late, his favorite spiced tea when he returned with tension in his shoulders. Sometimes, he would speak to me, nothing too personal, just observations about the palace, questions about how long I'd served there, but the simple acknowledgement of my existence felt significant. In his chambers, I wasn't invisible. He saw me. Meanwhile, the selection progressed. 5 princesses had already departed, having failed to capture the king's interest. The remaining 15 grew increasingly competitive, their strategies ranging from demure shyness to bold flirtation. Palace gossip tracked every interaction, every slight favor or dismissal. The king danced twice with Princess Valentina at last night's ball. Marta informed me as we collected laundry. But he spoke longest with Princess Isolde during dinner. I nodded politely, offering nothing in return. My new position had created distance between me and the other servants. They viewed me with a mixture of envy and suspicion, wondering what I'd done to earn such a placement. If they noticed the bruise on my cheek from Princess Isolde's slap, they said nothing. Such treatment from nobles wasn't uncommon enough to remark upon. One evening, I entered the king's chambers to find him slumped in a chair before the fire, a glass of amber liquid dangling from his fingers. He didn't acknowledge my presence as I moved quietly around the room, turning down the bed and closing the curtains. "Do you know what they call me, Ilara?" he asked suddenly, his voice rough. "The princesses, the courtiers, even some of my own council?" I paused in my work. "I couldn't say, Your Majesty." "The frozen king." He laughed without humor. "They think I cannot hear their whispers, that I have no heart, no ability to love, that my wolf is too dominant, too wild to accept a mate." I remained silent, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed a response. 3 months of this charade," he continued, staring into his glass. 3 months of false smiles and calculated seductions, as if my mate, my queen, could be chosen through such artifice. "Perhaps," I ventured carefully, "the right person will reveal themselves despite the artifice." He looked up at me then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Perhaps they already have." My breath caught at the intensity of his gaze. Surely he couldn't mean. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken possibility. Then he set down his glass and rose from the chair. "It's late. You should retire for the night." I curtsied, confused by the abrupt dismissal yet relieved by it too. "Of course, Your Majesty. Good night." As I reached the door, he called after me. "Ilara?" I turned. "Yes, Your Majesty?" "Thank you for listening." Such a small thing, yet the sincerity in his voice made it feel monumental. I smiled. A real smile, not the careful, neutral expression I typically maintained in noble presence. "Always, Your Majesty." The palace transformed over the following week. Midsummer celebrations approached, a week-long festival culminating in a grand masquerade ball. Servants scurried about hanging garlands of summer flowers, polishing silver until it gleamed, and preparing guest chambers for the additional nobles arriving from across the 7 kingdoms. For the remaining 12 princesses, the festival represented their greatest opportunity to capture the king's attention. Elaborate gowns were unpacked, jewels polished, dance steps practiced late into the night. The competition had grown vicious as frontrunners emerged. Princess Isolde from the coastal kingdoms, Princess Valentina from the southern plains, and Princess Aria from the northern mountains led the unofficial rankings. "The betting pools have Princess Valentina as the favorite," whispered Marta as we crossed paths in the corridor. 3-to-1 odds. But Princess Isolde's father arrived yesterday with a chest of diamonds as a dowry offering. "They say it's enough to fund the kingdom's armies for 5 years. I nodded non-committally, balancing a breakfast tray intended for the king. Since our strange conversation by the fire, something had shifted between us. Nothing improper, nothing that could be named, but a tension hummed in the air when we occupied the same space. Sometimes I would look up from my work to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You've been spending much time in his chambers," Marta pressed, eyeing the tray with curiosity. "What does he say about the princesses? Does he favor any of them?" "His Majesty doesn't discuss such matters with servants," I replied carefully. Marta looked disappointed but not surprised. "Always so proper, Ilara. It's why Mrs. Winters hasn't found a reason to demote you yet, though not for lack of trying." I smiled tightly and continued toward the West Wing. The truth was, the king had begun to speak to me more frequently, not about the selection specifically, but about his frustrations with court life, his concerns for the kingdom, even occasionally his childhood memories. Small confidences that felt significant precisely because they weren't shared with others. I knew I was treading dangerous ground. Servants who grew too familiar with their masters inevitably suffered for it. Yet I couldn't bring myself to maintain the proper distance. The king's outer door was ajar when I arrived. Strange. He usually kept it locked. I nudged it open with my hip, balancing the heavy tray. "Your Majesty? I've brought your—" I stopped short at the tableau before me. King Dominic stood by the window, arms crossed defensively, while Princess Valentina perched on the edge of his desk. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her crimson gown seemed designed to display her considerable assets. At my entrance, she turned with an annoyed expression that quickly transformed into calculating interest. "Ah, breakfast arrives," she purred. "Perfect timing. We've worked up quite an appetite, haven't we, Dominic?" The king's jaw tightened at her use of his given name. That will be all, Princess Valentina. As I explained, I have council matters to attend to this morning. She pouted prettily, always so dedicated to your duties. It's why you'll make such a magnificent mate. She rose gracefully, trailing her fingers along his arm as she passed. Until the ball tonight. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor as she sauntered past me, the scent of her exotic perfume lingering in her wake. Only when the door closed behind her did I dare look up. The king ran a hand through his hair in obvious frustration. That woman is relentless. I moved to set the tray on his desk. Shall I come back later, Your Majesty? No, stay. He sighed heavily. I need a moment of normalcy before facing the rest of this interminable day. I arranged his breakfast as he settled at the desk. Fresh bread, summer berries, smoked ham, and the spiced tea he preferred. I'd added a sprig of lavender beside the plate, a small touch that had earned a rare smile on previous mornings. She was waiting when I returned from my walk, he explained, though no explanation was required. Claimed she'd been given the wrong directions to the council chamber. A convincing story, Your Majesty. I kept my tone neutral, about as convincing as Princess Aria's sudden interest in hunting, or Princess Isolde's newfound passion for dawn meditation. He spread jam on a piece of bread with more force than necessary. Do they think me a fool? That I cannot see through these transparent tactics? I remained silent, unsure if he truly wanted a response, or simply needed to vent his frustrations. You may speak freely, Alara, he said, noticing my hesitation. What do you make of all this maneuvering? I considered my words carefully. They seek to secure their futures, Your Majesty. For a princess, marriage is both political strategy and personal survival. You sound almost sympathetic. I understand desperation, I said quietly. When Princess Isolde spoke of being given to Lord Karsten if she fails here, I believed her fear was genuine. The king's expression softened. You see more than most, don't you? It's easier to observe when no one notices you watching. I notice you, he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent an inappropriate shiver through me. I busied myself straightening items that needed no straightening. The masquerade begins at sunset, Your Majesty. Master Gerard asked me to remind you that the royal tailor will arrive at midday with your final fitting. He accepted the change of subject with a slight nod. More finery to parade about in. Sometimes I envy you, Alara. The statement was so unexpected I nearly dropped the teapot. Envy me, Your Majesty? The simplicity of your life, the authenticity. He gestured vaguely. You needn't pretend to be something you're not. I couldn't help the small, bitter laugh that escaped me. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but servants pretend every day. We hide our exhaustion, our hunger, our opinions. We smile through insults and bow to those who treat us like furniture. We just do it without fine clothes or titles. I immediately regretted my candor. I apologize. I spoke out of turn. To my surprise, he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. No, you spoke honestly. It's refreshing. He considered me thoughtfully. You're different from the others, Alara. You always have been. What could I possibly say to that? I curtsied slightly, falling back on formality to mask my confusion. Will there be anything else, Your Majesty? No, he said, still watching me with that unsettling intensity. You may go. I escaped to the corridor, pressing a hand to my fluttering heart. This dangerous awareness between us could lead nowhere good. He was the Alpha King, bound by duty to choose a royal mate. I was a servant with no family, no dowry, no standing. Whatever he might see in me, whatever I might foolishly feel for him, reality stood between us like an unscalable wall. The midsummer masquerade was the grandest event of the year, transforming the palace into a wonderland of light and music. Even the servants were permitted to observe from designated alcoves once their duties were complete. It was tradition, a small taste of the splendor usually reserved for nobility. I worked through the evening, ensuring the king's chambers would be perfect upon his return. Fresh linen scented with cedar, a fire laid ready for lighting, a decanter of his preferred whiskey beside a single glass. Small comforts for what I knew would be a trying night. As the clock struck 9, my duties complete, I slipped into the shadows of the grand ballroom's upper gallery. Below, Hundreds of masked figures swirled in a kaleidoscope of color and movement. Elaborate costumes transformed familiar nobles into mythical creatures, historical figures, and fantastical beings. I easily spotted the king despite his mask. A silver wolf visage that covered the upper half of his face. He moved with distinctive grace, towering above most guests. Currently, he danced with Princess Arya, whose swan-feathered costume complemented her willowy frame. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? I startled at the voice beside me. An elderly woman had appeared, her silver hair elegantly coiffed above a simple mask of midnight blue. Her gown, though fine, lacked the ostentatious embellishments favored by court ladies. "Yes, my lady," I answered, dipping into a curtsy. She waved away the formality. "None of that. We're all equal under masks, or so the tradition claims." Her shrewd eyes studied me. "You're the girl, aren't you? The one attending Dominic's chambers?" My pulse quickened. "I serve His Majesty, yes." She turned back to the ballroom, her gaze finding the king as he escorted Princess Arya from the dance floor. "He's miserable, you know. Has been since this selection nonsense began." I remained silent, uncertain how to respond. "3 generations I've served this family," she continued. "I was nursemaid to Dominic's father, and his father before him. I know the Blackthorn line better than they know themselves." She tapped gnarled fingers against the railing. "The wolf knows its mate. All this pageantry is political theater, nothing more." "Lady Eleanor," a courtier approached, bowing deeply to the elderly woman. "We've been searching everywhere. The Dowager Queen requests your presence in the royal box." The woman, Lady Eleanor, sighed dramatically. "Duty calls, even for old women." She turned back to me, pressing something into my palm. "The servants' masquerade begins at midnight in the South Gardens. You should attend." I looked down to find a simple mask of pale silver, adorned with tiny crystals that caught the light. I couldn't possibly. "Nonsense. Young people should dance while they can." She patted my hand. "My bones are too old for such frivolity. But you still have time." Before I could protest further, she departed with the courtier, leaving me clutching the beautiful mask and thoroughly confused by the encounter. The servants' masquerade was a lesser-known tradition, begun generations ago by a queen who believed all should celebrate the midsummer. While nobility danced in the grand ballroom, the palace staff gathered in the South Gardens for their own festivities, modest by comparison but no less joyful. I had never attended, preferring solitude to celebration. But Lady Eleanor's gift felt like a summons I couldn't ignore. After ensuring the king's chambers were perfect one final time, I returned to my small room to prepare. I owned one dress that wasn't a uniform. A simple gown of pale blue that had belonged to my mother. I'd preserved it carefully, wearing it only on the anniversary of her death, when I visited the small shrine I'd created for her in a forgotten corner of the palace grounds. The style was outdated, the hem a bit too short after my last growth spurt, but it was the only option available. I let my hair down, the pale blonde waves falling past my shoulders. With trembling fingers, I secured Lady Eleanor's mask, marveling at how the silver complemented my eyes. The mirror above my wash basin reflected a stranger, not quite a servant. Certainly not a noble, but something in between. The South Gardens hummed with restrained merriment when I arrived. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting golden light over gathered servants enjoying rare leisure. A small group of musically inclined staff played cheerful tunes while others danced on the lawn. Tables laden with leftover delicacies from the main banquet provided a feast few servants ever tasted. Marta spotted me immediately, waving me over to a group gathered near the musicians. "Elara, I never thought you'd come." She wore a mask of bright green that matched her festive dress. "And look at you. Almost like a proper lady." I smiled nervously, accepting a cup of watered wine. Lady Eleanor insisted I attend. "The king's old nursemaid?" Marta raised her eyebrows. "What business does she have with you?" Before I could respond, a hush fell over the gathering. All eyes turned toward the garden entrance where a tall figure had appeared. Even masked and dressed in simpler clothing than his usual royal attire, King Dominic's presence commanded attention. "The Alpha comes to observe," someone whispered nearby. "It's tradition." Indeed, Each year the king made a brief appearance at the servants' celebration, a gesture of acknowledgement that dated back generations. He would walk among them, perhaps share a drink, and then return to the nobles' festivities. I shrank back, hoping to avoid notice. The strange tension between us felt too fragile, too dangerous to test in this setting. But fate, or perhaps my distinctive pale hair, betrayed me. His gaze found mine across the garden, and even behind his mask, I recognized the moment of recognition. He spoke briefly to Master Gerard, who had appeared at his side, then began moving purposefully in my direction. Panic fluttered in my chest. I backed away, seeking escape, but found myself trapped against a hedge. "Ilara," he said as he reached me, his voice pitched low for my ears alone. "I almost didn't recognize you without your cap." I curtsied deeply, eyes lowered. "Your Majesty honors us with his presence. Please, not tonight." He glanced around at the servants who watched us curiously. "Tonight? I'm simply Dominic." "That could never be true, Your Majesty," I whispered, not even behind a mask. Something like frustration crossed his features. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. I fell into step beside him, acutely aware of the stares following us, and the whispers erupting in our wake. He led me away from the main celebration, toward a small alcove formed by flowering shrubs. Private, yet still within sight of others. A concession to propriety. "You're avoiding me," he stated once we were relatively alone. "I've attended to your chambers every day, Your Majesty. You know what I mean." He removed his mask, revealing features taut with some internal struggle. "Since our conversation about the princesses, you've been different. Distant." I swallowed hard. It would be inappropriate for me to be anything else. "Inappropriate," he repeated, as if tasting a foreign word. "Court life is built on that word. Don't stand too close. Don't speak too freely. Don't follow your instincts. Your instincts should be leading you toward a suitable queen," I said softly. "The selection is a farce." He raked a hand through his hair, 20 princesses parading before me, and my wolf remained silent. "Do you know what that means, Ilara?" I shook my head. "It means none of them is my true mate. None of them awakens the primal recognition that should guide an alpha's choice." His gaze intensified, but something else has happened, something unexpected, something impossible. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Your Majesty, when you entered my study that first night," he continued, stepping closer, "when our eyes met, my wolf recognized you." The words hung in the night air between us, impossible and terrifying in their implications. "That's not possible," I whispered, even as something deep within me resonated with his confession. "I'm nobody, a servant without family or standing. The wolf doesn't care about titles or bloodlines." His hand rose, hesitating just shy of touching my cheek. "It knows its other half by instinct older than kingdoms." I stepped back, suddenly finding it difficult to breathe. "You can't mean this. The council would never accept." "Ilara." Marta's panicked voice cut through our conversation. She rushed toward us, her face pale beneath her mask. "Come quickly. Princess Isolde is looking for you. She's furious. Something about stolen jewelry." Cold dread washed over me. "What?" "Her diamond hair combs are missing," Marta explained breathlessly. "She's claiming you took them when you delivered linens this morning. The palace guards are searching your room right now." The king's expression darkened. "I gave no such order." "It came from Lord Karsten, Your Majesty," Marta said, cursing hastily. "He arrived with Princess Isolde's father yesterday." Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. Princess Isolde had created the perfect trap, one designed to eliminate me from the king's proximity permanently. Theft from royalty was punishable by imprisonment at best, execution at worst. And in that moment, as the midsummer celebrations continued around us, and my fragile world began to crumble, I realized that Princess Isolde had seen what I had tried desperately to deny. The king cared for me, and now I would pay the price. "They'll find the combs in my room." The realization hit me with sickening certainty. She planted them there. The king's face hardened into the impassive mask he wore at court. "Return to the celebration, Marta. Say nothing of this to anyone." Marta curtsied hastily and retreated, casting a worried glance over her shoulder. Once she was out of earshot, King Dominic turned to me, his voice low and urgent. Listen carefully. Go to my chambers now, through the servants' passages. Wait for me there. But the guards will not question my direct order. He slipped a heavy signet ring from his finger and pressed it into my palm. Show this to anyone who tries to stop you. Now go. Quickly. I clutched the ring, its weight significant in more ways than one. Without another word, I gathered my skirts and slipped away from the garden, heart pounding against my ribs. The servants' corridors were mercifully empty, most staff still enjoying the rare opportunity for celebration. I moved silently through the narrow passages, the route to the king's chambers so familiar I could navigate it blindfolded. As I neared the west wing, voices echoed ahead, palace guards, their tone official. I pressed myself into an alcove, barely breathing as they passed. Search the entire servants' quarter, one was saying. Lord Karsten wants the thief made an example of. Seems excessive for hair combs, even diamond ones, his companion replied. It's not about the combs. Haven't you noticed how the king looks at that servant girl? Princess Isolde isn't one to tolerate competition, even from a nobody. Their voices faded as they continued down the corridor. I waited until silence returned, before emerging from my hiding place, the guards' words echoing in my mind. Even they had noticed the king's attention. How utterly careless we had been. I reached the hidden entrance to the royal apartments without further incident. The king's chambers were dark and silent, the fire I'd laid earlier still unlit. I moved to the window, peering down at the courtyard where guards with torches moved with purpose toward the servants' quarters. My mother's thimble pressed against my skin through the pocket of my dress. I withdrew it, the small silver object catching the moonlight. What would you do, Mother? I whispered. She had always counseled honesty and dignity, even in the face of injustice, but she had never faced a situation where honesty meant certain destruction. The soft click of the main door startled me from my thoughts. I spun around, expecting the king, but found myself facing Princess Isolde instead. She wore an elaborate mask of peacock feathers that did little to hide her triumphant smile. I thought I might find you here, she said, closing the door behind her. Seeking protection from your royal admirer? I straightened my spine, refusing to cower. You planted those combs in my room. Of course I did. She removed her mask, setting it casually on a side table as if she belonged in these private chambers. Did you think I wouldn't notice how he looks at you? How he requests your service specifically? How he tenses when I speak your name? Whatever you believe exists between His Majesty and me, you're mistaken. She laughed, the sound brittle in the quiet room. Oh, please. I've been trained since childhood to read the smallest signs of interest or disfavor. The king's infatuation with you is embarrassingly obvious. She circled me slowly, like a predator. A servant girl. How utterly cliché. Princess Isolde. You know what happens to servant girls who rise above their station? She stopped directly before me, her beautiful face hardened with malice. They fall. Hard and publicly. Your punishment for theft will be carried out before the entire court, 30 lashes if tradition holds. Few survive with their minds intact. Fear coiled in my stomach, but I refused to let her see it. The king knows I'm innocent. The king cannot intervene without causing a diplomatic incident with my father's kingdom. She smiled coldly. Which means you have exactly one option for avoiding the lash. I waited, knowing what came next would be no mercy. Confess to the theft, accept banishment from the 7 kingdoms, and disappear forever. She reached into her gown and withdrew a small pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Enough gold to start a new life far away. And if I refuse, then not only will you face punishment, but I'll ensure every servant who has shown you kindness suffers as well, starting with your friend Marta. The cruelty of her offer stole my breath. Either way, my life at the palace was over. But her threat against the other servants left me no real choice. You've already won the selection, I said quietly. The king must choose a royal bride. Why not simply let me continue in my position? Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, perhaps even fear, because he doesn't look at me the way he looks at you, and I will not be a queen who must compete with a servant for her king's attention. The door opened again, and we both turned to see King Dominic standing in the entrance, his expression thunderous. Behind him loomed Master Gerard and Lady Eleanor, the elderly woman's shrewd eyes taking in the scene with remarkable clarity. Princess Isolde, the king said, his voice dangerously soft. I don't recall summoning you to my private chambers. Princess Isolde dropped immediately into a graceful curtsy, her demeanor transforming. Your Majesty, I was just threatening my personal attendant, he suggested, attempting to coerce a false confession. I don't know what she's told you, but she's told me nothing, he interrupted. I didn't need her to. Did you truly believe I wouldn't investigate such serious accusations myself? He gestured to Lady Eleanor. Lady Eleanor has served the Blackthorn family for 3 generations. Her quarters adjoin yours in the East Wing. She observed your lady's maid planting the missing combs in Alara's room this afternoon. Princess Isolde paled visibly. A misunderstanding. Enough. The king's voice cracked like a whip. Lady Eleanor, please escort Princess Isolde to her chambers. She is to begin preparations for departure immediately. Her father will be informed of the situation in the morning. Lady Eleanor stepped forward, her elderly frame somehow imposing in its dignity. With pleasure, Your Majesty. Princess Isolde's shock gave way to fury as she realized the totality of her defeat. You would dismiss me, a princess of the coastal kingdoms, over a servant girl? My father will never stand for this insult. Your father, the king replied coldly, values the trade agreements with my kingdom far more than your marriage prospects, particularly when presented with evidence of your attempt to frame an innocent subject of my realm for theft. Lady Eleanor took Princess Isolde's arm with surprising firmness. Come, child. Best not to make this more undignified than necessary. As they departed, Princess Isolde cast one last venomous glance in my direction. The threat in her eyes was unmistakable. This was not over. Once they were gone, Master Gerard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Your Majesty, shall I alert the captain to call off the search? Immediately, the king confirmed. And Gerard, what transpired tonight is to remain private. Is that understood? Of course, Your Majesty. He bowed deeply and departed, closing the door behind him. Silence descended upon the chamber. I stood frozen, still clutching the king's signet ring in one hand and my mother's thimble in the other. The reality of what had just occurred, and what had almost happened, washed over me in waves. You saved me, I whispered. The king crossed the room to stand before me, gently taking his ring from my palm. Did you doubt that I would? My voice faltered. You're the Alpha King. Your duty is to your kingdom, not to a servant. Is that how you still see yourself, as just a servant? He studied me with that intense gaze that seemed to strip away all pretense. After everything that's happened between us? Nothing has happened, I insisted, though the words rang hollow even to my own ears. Nothing tangible, perhaps, his voice softened. But you feel it too, Ilara, this connection between us, something neither of us sought but cannot deny. I turned away, moving to the fireplace where I busied myself lighting the kindling I'd laid earlier. The simple, familiar task gave my trembling hands purpose. What happens now? I asked, keeping my back to him. Princess Isolde will spread rumors. The other princesses will question why she was dismissed. Let them question. He remained where he stood, allowing me the space I desperately needed. The selection continues. I have a bride to choose within the next month. The casual statement landed like a physical blow. Despite everything, reality reasserted itself. He was still the Alpha King, bound by duty and tradition to choose a royal mate. Of course, I murmured, watching the small flames catch and grow among the kindling. I should return to my duties, your duties. He sighed heavily, always hiding behind propriety. I turned to face him then, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. What would you have me say? That I feel something impossible when you look at me? That I dream of things that can never be? I know my place in this world, Your Majesty. I've always known it. And if I told you your place might be different than you believed? He moved closer, his expression softening. Lady Eleanor didn't just happen to witness your framing. I asked her to watch over you after our conversation in the garden. Why would she agree to protect a servant? Because you're not... He stopped himself, seeming to reconsider his words. She has always valued truth over station. And she sees what I see in you. The cryptic statement hung between us, loaded with implications I couldn't fully grasp. Before I could question him further, A sharp knock at the door interrupted the moment. The king's expression closed, his royal mask sliding back into place. "Enter," he called. A palace guard appeared, bowing deeply. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty. There's been an incident in the East Wing. Princess Valentina and Princess Aria are... well, they're dueling in the Rose Garden." "Dueling?" The king's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "With what weapons?" Dinner forks, Your Majesty, and rather colorful language." Despite everything, a laugh bubbled up from my chest before I could suppress it. The king's lips twitched in response. "It seems my presence is required," he said, the formality returning to his tone. "We will continue this conversation another time, Alara." I curtsied automatically. "Yes, Your Majesty." As he departed, I remained in his chambers, the fire now crackling merrily in the grate, warm, bright, but ultimately contained. Like whatever existed between us, it could provide light and heat, but must never spread beyond its boundaries. The following days brought a flurry of changes to the palace. Princess Isolde and her entourage departed without public explanation, though rumors spread rapidly. Some claimed she had been caught trying to bribe the king's advisors. Others whispered that her father had recalled her for a more advantageous match elsewhere. No one suspected the truth, for which I was grateful. The selection continued with increased fervor, as the remaining 11 princesses sensed their improving odds. Princess Valentina and Princess Aria, having apparently resolved their fork duel with no serious injuries, emerged as the clear frontrunners. As for me, I continued my duties in the king's chambers, though our interactions grew increasingly strained. He was often absent, his days filled with selection activities and council meetings. When we did cross paths, conversation remained formal, both of us carefully avoiding any reference to the night of the masquerade or Princess Isolde's accusations. A week after the incident, I arrived at the king's chambers one morning to find Lady Eleanor waiting for me instead of the king. "There you are, child," she said, rising from the chair where she'd been sitting. "I've been waiting to speak with you privately." I curtsied respectfully. "Lady Eleanor, how may I serve you?" "You may start by dropping the servile manner," she replied with a hint of impatience. "It doesn't suit you, particularly not after what I've discovered." My pulse quickened. "Discovered?" She withdrew a folded letter from her sleeve. "Do you know why I've served the Blackthorn family for 3 generations? Why I alone am permitted certain liberties that would cost others their positions?" I shook my head. "Because I am a distant cousin of the royal line. My grandmother was sister to King Dominic's great-grandfather." She tapped the letter thoughtfully. "Blood connections, however diluted, matter in royal circles. They open doors, provide access to records most never see. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Don't you?" She studied me with those shrewd eyes. "Your mother was named Lillian, was she not? A cook in the palace kitchens who died of fever 5 years ago." I stiffened. "How did you know that?" "Because I've been searching the palace records," she said, unfolding the letter. "Searching for any mention of a woman with pale blonde hair and unusual silver-gray eyes. Traits that run in certain bloodlines but are exceedingly rare among common folk." "My mother was common-born," I insisted, though uncertainty crept into my voice. "A farmer's daughter from the western provinces. Was she?" Lady Eleanor extended the letter toward me. This might suggest otherwise. With trembling fingers, I accepted the parchment. The handwriting was elegant, the ink faded with age. As I read, the world seemed to shift beneath my feet. "To my dearest sister Eleanor, I write with heavy heart to inform you that our niece Lillian has fled the northern court with her newborn daughter. The child's father, as you know, was deemed an unsuitable match due to his common birth, and the High Council had arranged a more advantageous marriage for Lillian. Rather than surrender her child or marry against her will, she has chosen exile. I have reason to believe she seeks anonymity in the southern kingdoms, perhaps even within the Blackthorn realm. If you should encounter her, I beg you to offer what protection you can. Though I understand your position at court limits your options. The child, if my sources are correct, bears the family traits, the pale hair and silver eyes that mark our bloodline. Her name, according to the midwife, is Alara. With eternal affection, Your brother, Lord Cassius Winterwind of the Northern Territories. I read the letter twice, my mind struggling to comprehend its implications. This can't be true. I suspected when I first saw you at the masquerade, Lady Eleanor said gently. You have the Winterwind look, unmistakable to those who know it. But I needed proof before approaching either you or the king. If this is true, I whispered, then my mother was Lady Lillian Winterwind, niece to Lord Cassius, from a minor branch of the Northern royal family. Lady Eleanor's expression softened with compassion. She chose love over position and paid the price of exile. But she never told me. The betrayal stung, even across the chasm of death. All these years, she let me believe we were common-born. To protect you, child. The Northern court has long memory and little mercy for those who defy tradition. As long as you remained simply Alara, daughter of a cook, you were safe from their reach. My mother's final words echoed in my memory. True power comes not from crowns or commands, but from here. Kindness endures when strength fails. Had that been her way of preparing me for a truth she knew would eventually emerge? Does the king know? I asked, suddenly fearful. Not yet. I thought you deserved to learn the truth first, to decide how to proceed. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. I'm still just a servant. Noble blood or not, my mother forsook her title. I have no claim, no dowry, no standing at court. Perhaps, Lady Eleanor conceded, but you are no longer simply nobody. And that, my dear, changes everything where the Alpha King is concerned. She was right. If what the king had confessed during the masquerade was true, if his wolf had recognized me as his true mate, then my newly discovered heritage removed one significant barrier between us. Not all, certainly. The council would still expect a political match, an alliance with one of the powerful kingdoms. But royal blood, however diluted, gave me a place in the world I had never imagined possible. What should I do? I asked, feeling adrift in suddenly unfamiliar waters. Lady Eleanor smiled, patting my hand. First, you continue your duties as if nothing has changed. Let me speak with the king privately. There are protocols for such situations, traditions older than the selection itself. As she rose to leave, a thought struck me. Princess Isolde. She called me a nobody, said I was rising above my station. Ironic, isn't it? Lady Eleanor's eyes twinkled. She feared competition from a servant, never suspecting she was competing with a descendant of the Northern royal line. The wolf knows, Alara. It always knows. After she departed, I remained in the king's chambers. The letter clutched in my hands, my entire understanding of myself fundamentally altered. I was not who I had believed myself to be. My mother had carried secrets to her grave, seeking to protect me from a past she had fled. And now that past had found me, offering possibilities I had never dared to imagine. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I continued my duties as if nothing had changed, while inside, my thoughts churned like storm-tossed seas. Each time I entered the king's chambers, I wondered if Lady Eleanor had spoken to him yet, if he knew the truth about my heritage. His manner revealed nothing. He remained polite, but distant. Our conversations limited to necessary exchanges about household matters. Meanwhile, the selection approached its final stages. 7 princesses remained, each more determined than the last. Princess Valentina had emerged as the clear favorite among the court, her beauty and confidence seemingly irresistible. The betting pools heavily favored her, with Princess Aria from the northern mountains a distant second. The king danced with Princess Valentina 3 times at last night's dinner, Marta informed me, as we crossed paths in the corridor. They say the announcement could come as early as next week. I nodded noncommittally, ignoring the sharp pain beneath my ribs at her words. What did it matter if I had discovered noble blood in my veins? The king still needed a political alliance, not a distant relation to a minor branch of the Northern royal family. You don't seem surprised, Marta observed, studying me closely. Though I suppose you've seen more than most, working in his chambers. I forced a smile. His Majesty keeps his own counsel. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. They say Princess Isolde's dismissal had something to do with you, that she made accusations. I need to fetch fresh linens, I interrupted, unwilling to revisit that particular nightmare. Excuse me, Marta. I fled to the laundry, seeking solace in routine tasks. The familiar sense of lye soap and clean cotton centered me, and I lost myself in folding sheets with precise corners, exactly as I had been taught. This, at least, remained unchanged. Whatever my bloodline, my hands still knew the work of service. Ilara. Master Gerard's voice cut through my concentration. His Majesty requests your presence in the council chamber immediately. My heart stuttered. The council chamber? Are you certain? Quite certain. His expression revealed nothing. I am to escort you there now. I wiped my hands nervously on my apron, suddenly acutely aware of my servant's attire. Should I change first? There's no time. The council is assembled. Something like sympathy flickered in his eyes. Whatever happens, remember that you have friends within these walls. The cryptic statement did nothing to calm my nerves as I followed him through the palace corridors. Servants and nobles alike stared as we passed, whispers erupting in our wake. To be summoned to the council chamber, the heart of the kingdom's governance, was unprecedented for someone of my station, or what they believed to be my station. 2 royal guards flanked the massive oak doors of the council chamber. They nodded respectfully to Master Gerard, then surprisingly to me as well. Take a deep breath, Master Gerard advised quietly, and remember who you are. The problem was, I no longer knew exactly who that was. The door swung open to reveal the circular chamber beyond. A round table dominated the space, surrounded by 12 high-backed chairs occupied by the kingdom's most powerful advisors. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the stone floor. At the head of the table sat King Dominic, his expression unreadable. Lady Eleanor stood slightly behind his chair, her presence unusual for a council meeting. And beside them, my breath caught. An elderly man with a regal bearing rose from his seat. Though his hair had gone silver with age, his eyes, a striking gray like polished steel, were unmistakably similar to my own. He wore the formal robes of the Northern Territories, trimmed with white fur and fastened with a silver clasp shaped like a snowflake. "Approach, child," the king commanded gently. On trembling legs, I moved to stand before the table. The council members observed me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. "Council members," King Dominic began formally, "may I present Lady Ilara Winterwind, niece to Lord Cassius Winterwind of the Northern Territories." A murmur rippled through the room. I stared at the king in shock, my new title sounding foreign to my ears. "Niece to Lord Cassius Winterwind?" Lord Blackwell, the king's chief advisor, repeated incredulously. "The servant girl?" "My great-niece," the elderly man confirmed, his voice deep and resonant, "daughter of my niece Lillian, who fled our court 23 years ago." He approached me slowly, his eyes examining every feature of my face. I would know those eyes anywhere. My sister's eyes, my niece's eyes. His own glistened with unshed tears. "And now yours, child." "Lord Cassius arrived this morning," the king explained to the council, responding to Lady Eleanor's inquiry about a possible connection between the Winterwind line and Ilara. "I have spent 23 years searching," Lord Cassius said softly. "When Lillian fled with her infant daughter, I feared them both lost forever. To discover you here, alive and well." He reached out a weathered hand to touch my cheek. "It is more than I dared hope for." I wanted to speak, but words failed me. This stranger claimed me as family, yet my mother had chosen to flee from the world he represented. Why? What had driven her to abandon wealth and position for a life of anonymity and service? "This is all very touching," Lord Blackwell interrupted, "but what relevance does it have to council matters? The girl may have noble blood, but she was raised as a servant. Her mother renounced her position. By law, she has no claim to the Winterwind title or lands." "Not precisely correct," Lady Eleanor interjected. "Lillian fled an arranged marriage, but she never formally renounced her position. Under Northern law, her daughter retains claim to both title and inheritance, particularly as she is now the last living descendant of that branch of the family." Lord Cassius nodded. "Indeed. Ilara is, by birth and by law, Lady Winterwind. Upon my death, A significant portion of the northern territories would fall under her stewardship. Another wave of murmurs swept the room. I struggled to process the implications. Not only was I apparently noble-born, but I stood to inherit lands and title in the future. Even so, Lord Blackwell persisted, what bearing does this have on matters of state? We are in the midst of the royal selection. The king must choose a bride from among the princesses to secure alliances for the kingdom. That, the king said, rising from his seat, is precisely why I've called this council meeting. His gaze found mine, warming slightly. Lady Eleanor has brought to my attention an ancient law regarding the alpha's selection of a mate. Lord Thorne, would you be so kind as to read from the Book of Succession? An elderly counselor opened a massive tome bound in faded leather. He adjusted his spectacles and read in a quavering voice, "Should the alpha's wolf recognize its true mate, this bond supersedes all political arrangements. For the strength of the kingdom rests upon the strength of its alpha, and an alpha forced to reject his true mate for political expedience will never rule at full strength. The wolf's choice, once verified by the Elder Council, becomes law." Silence fell over the chamber as the implications became clear. Lord Blackwell was the first to recover, his face flushing with outrage. "Surely your Majesty isn't suggesting—" "I am declaring," the king interrupted, his voice taking on the alpha resonance that vibrated through the chamber, "that my wolf has recognized its true mate, and she stands before you now." All eyes turned to me. I felt the blood drain from my face as the king's words registered fully. He was invoking the ancient law to choose me over the princesses of the selection. Lord Blackwell sputtered, This is unprecedented. The diplomatic repercussions are manageable," Lord Cassius interjected smoothly. "A union between the Blackthorn and Winterwind houses would strengthen our northern borders and secure valuable trade routes through mountain passes, controlled by my family for generations." "And the selection candidates?" another counselor asked. "Will be compensated generously for their time," the king replied. "Lady Eleanor has already drafted letters explaining the invocation of the ancient law. Most will understand. The law of the wolf is respected across all kingdoms." Lord Blackwell wasn't ready to concede. "The law requires verification by the Elder Council. Subjective claims of recognition are insufficient." "Indeed," the king agreed, "which is why I've summoned the elders. They arrive tomorrow for the traditional testing." Testing. The word sent a shiver down my spine. I had heard whispers of the ancient rituals used to verify a true mate bond, though the specifics were kept secret from all but the royal family and their closest advisors. "Your Majesty," I finally found my voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "I haven't agreed to any of this." The king's expression softened as he turned to me. "No, you haven't. And you won't be forced, Alara. The choice must be yours, freely given." "The girl has been a servant her entire life," Lord Blackwell scoffed. "What do you imagine she'll choose? Of course she'll agree to become queen." "You underestimate her," the king replied, his eyes never leaving mine, "as many have." And he was right. Despite the dizzying prospect of crowns and castles, my thoughts raced with doubts. My mother had fled this world for reasons I still didn't understand. Could I embrace what she had rejected? Did I even want to? And what of the king himself? Was his declaration born of genuine feeling, or merely the convenience of a newly discovered noble heritage that made me an acceptable choice? "The council is adjourned until the elders arrive," the king announced. "Lady Alara will be moved to appropriate quarters befitting her station, and provided with suitable attire and attendants." As the counselors filed out, murmuring among themselves, I remained frozen in place. Lord Cassius approached me, his eyes kind but cautious. "I have so much to tell you, child, about your mother, your heritage, the family you never knew." He hesitated. "If you wish to hear it," I nodded mutely, still overwhelmed. "Come," Lady Eleanor said, taking my arm gently. "Let's get you settled in your new chambers. There will be time for questions later." The king remained at the table as we departed, his gaze following me. The weight of his regard, and all it implied, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My new chambers in the East Wing were larger than my entire family home had been. Lady Eleanor supervised as servants, those who had been my colleagues mere hours ago, unpacked trunks of clothing that apparently belonged to me now. Lord Cassius brought these from the northern estate, she explained. They belonged to your mother in her youth. I touched the fine fabrics with reverence, imagining my mother wearing these gowns, walking the halls of a northern castle, living a life completely different from the one I had known. Why did she never tell me? I whispered. To protect you, Lady Eleanor replied. The northern court can be unforgiving of those who defy tradition. Your father was a royal guardsman, brave and honorable, but common-born. Their love was forbidden. When the council arranged a political marriage for your mother, she fled, rather than abandon either you or her heart's choice. My father? I had never known him, never even seen his face. What happened to him? He was killed defending your escape, she said gently. Your mother never fully recovered from that loss. She chose a life of anonymity to keep you safe from those who might have used you as a pawn in northern politics. The revelation left me breathless with grief for a father I'd never known, and a mother whose sacrifices I had never fully understood. And now I'm to be a pawn in a different game? No, came a deep voice from the doorway. The king stood there, having changed from his formal council attire into simpler clothing. You are to be a queen, if you choose it, not a pawn. Lady Eleanor tactfully withdrew, leaving us alone. The king entered cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance. This must be overwhelming, he said, to discover your heritage and be declared my true mate in the space of days. Is that what I am? I asked, finding courage in the tumult of emotions. Or am I simply a convenient solution? A servant with just enough noble blood to satisfy tradition without requiring major political concessions? His expression hardened. Do you truly believe I would use you so callously? I don't know what to believe anymore. I turned away, staring out at the garden, where, just days ago, I had been invisible to all but him. My entire life has been a carefully constructed lie. The mother I thought I knew kept her greatest secrets from me, and now you claim your wolf recognizes me as your mate. How can I possibly trust that? He was silent for a long moment. The testing, he finally said. Tomorrow, the elders will conduct the traditional verification of a true mate bond. It cannot be falsified or manipulated. If you agree to participate, you will have your answer, and so will I. I turned back to face him. And if the test confirms we are true mates, what then? Then the choice is yours, he said simply. To accept or reject the bond. To become my queen, or to take your inheritance in the north and live as Lady Winterwind, free from palace constraints. And if I choose freedom, pain flashed in his eyes, quickly masked, then I will respect your decision. An alpha's true mate must come willingly, or not at all. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Why did you never tell me what you suspected? About the bond? He paused at the threshold. Would you have believed me? A servant girl with no knowledge of her heritage, told she was the true mate of the Alpha King? He shook his head. You would have thought it a cruel jest, or worse, a nobleman's attempt to seduce a vulnerable servant. He was right. I would never have believed him. Tomorrow, he said softly. The truth for both of us.